Good afternoon, friends. At the outset, I wish all of you a very happy new year. I hope and wish the new year 2020 brings, most importantly, health and happiness for all. I extend a very warm welcome to all the participants to today's webinar. It is 36th webinar in this series, first in New Year 2021. Sir, during this COVID period, every Friday 4 to 5:30, we were organizing program, and we organized till today 35 webinar, and more than 40,000 people participated in this 35 webinars across topics or the interest for the corporate and the professionals. Friends, it is a matter of pride for us that three top proponents of corporate governance in India have very kindly joined us today to share their vision on the theme of today's webinar on corporate governance from tick box to good governance culture. On behalf of corporate professional, all the participants, and on my personal behalf, I extend a very healthy welcome to Sri Damodaran sir, Sri Arnab Goel sir, Sri Sailesh Haribhakti sir. It is indeed a great honor for us to have you with us today. Our illustrious speaker any formal introduction, nor is it possible to explain and capture their massive contribution to the corporate world. Nonetheless, I am pleased to share a few lines for their three speakers whom I have always personally admired and idolized. Two of our speakers are former IAS and the career bureaucrats. All of us have known Sri M. Damodaran, IAS retired, as the dynamic chairman of SEBI, who introduced a number of important corporate governance practices to India's security market. Among the other prominent positions held by him as chairman UTI and chairman IDBI. Few of us know that Sri Damodaran, as chief secretary of Tripura, was the youngest ever to be appointed as chief secretary of any state. While at SEBI, he was elected chairman of 80 members emerging market committee of International Organization of Securities Commission. After his successful stint with the government, he continued his passion for promoting good governance and set up Excellence Enabler Private Limited, a niche corporate governance and board advisory firm. In addition to this, Mr. Damodaran is presently a consultant, advisor, coach, and mentor. He is the independent director on the board of Larsen & Toubro, Hero MotoCorp, Bicon, Tech Mahindra, and CASIL. He is also non-executive chairman of Indigo. He is nominee director of board of Bajaj Allianz Insurance, Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance. He sits on the advisory board of some foreign entities too. He was the founder chairman of Indian Institute of Management, Tiruchirappalli. I welcome you, sir, for this webinar. Our next speaker is Arnab Goel, sir. He is IAS retired as a visionary, who is a secretary, Ministry of Corporate Affairs from 2006 to 2009. He introduced MCA 21 e-governance system, for which he received PM's award. He also gave us another form of business entity, that is limited liability partnership. During his tenure, he created new governance system and conceived and executed the globally acclaimed plan to save Satyam Computer Limited within 19 days of a fraud of more than 7,000 crore. It was his tenure that the Companies Bill 2008 was introduced, and later it became a Companies Act 2013. He is one who conceptualized and founded the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, that is called IICA. He also played key role in operationalizing the Competition Commission from 2009 to 2014 and as its member. He continues his passion of good governance till today. He founded the think tank Shaping Tomorrow Consultant LLP in 2014 to invent the future for shaping a better tomorrow. He has been advising, working with ministries and state government for the last 6 years as a futuristic and governance architect, including an area like future-ready governance, sustainable development goal, and has also been advisor to UNDP, IIT, IIM, and Genomic Institute also. I welcome Arnab Goel sir for this webinar. Sri Salesh Sharvakti, another enticing speaker as a career chartered accountant and cost accountant and certified internal auditor, financial planner and fraud examiner. His career span over 4 decades. He is currently chairman of Salesh Haribhakti and Associate Chartered Accountants. He is thickly into championing good governance and is the non-executive chairman of several companies, including L&T Finance, L&T Mutual Fund. He also holds directorship of several leading companies, including Toronto Pharmaceutical, Venet Coleman, Ambuja Cement, and so on, so various companies. He also serves as advisory board of Doha Bank. He is Gaja Advisory, is a PE firm, and the Excellence Enabler Private Limited. Sri Haribhakti sir actively promoted share value creation and a green environment through his own enterprise and his leadership role as a chairman of the CSR committee of some of the board that he serves on. Sri Haribhakti has in the past engaged as a chairman of a number of organizations, which include NPS Trust constituted by the pension, actively promoted share and development authority, WIRC of ICI and President Indian Merchant Chambers. Please join me welcoming Sri Salesh Haribhakti sir. These are our 3 learned speakers which will speak today. And before going to this, the program structure will be this. Just I'll give you a few lines of theme, and then I'll request all 3 speakers will speak. And we will take the question answer. I have received various questions, and then I'm receiving so many questions during this program also. Coming to the theme of this program, the good governance is no longer to be viewed as a mere compliances requirement of law, but need to be perceived essential for the survival of the company and its sustained growth. Good governance lays down the framework for creating long-term trust between companies and its external provider of capital. It balances the need and interest of various stakeholders. Employing good governance helps the company to regulate risk, prevent corporate scandals, create value for all stakeholders, which is most important. If I may say, no good governance is the cornerstone of any good business. It encompasses process, practice, assess and policies that a company relies on to make formal decision and manage the company. In India, it is an age-old concept. It is mentioned in Taittiriya Upanishad, Satyam Vad Dharmam Char, which means forever speak the truth and follow dharma. When applied to corporate, it means corporate are expected to use their capacity, knowledge, and resources towards maximization of stakeholders' value and well-being, the progress of humankind, that is called dharma. Through transparency, accountability, and truthful disclosure of state of affairs, that is called truth. Good governance is necessary to enable companies to operate more efficiently, to improve access of capital, mitigating risk, and safeguard stakeholders. It also makes companies more accountable and transparent to investors and gives them the tool to respond to legitimize shareholders' concern, including sustainable environment and social development. It contributes to development and increase access of the capital, encourage good investment, boost economic growth, and provides employment opportunity. In fact, the crux of good governance has been beautifully narrated in Rig Veda. That is called, there is a shlok, but I'm translating into this. The corporate should act like honeybee, which suck the nectar of the flowers without affecting its fragrance and produce honey for the well-being of society. I think this is the crux of corporate governance, which implies our age-old Vedic Rig Veda. Now, I will invite our most learned and elite speakers to share their views and experience. And may I therefore now request Salesh Haribhakti sir to share your views on corporate governance, sir. Sir, please unmute, sir.
Thank you very much, Pawanji. My very warm regards to Anurag ji and to my guru and person who I admire and revere, Mr. Damodaran. You have taken us to the heights of spiritual understanding of corporate governance. So I will not come into your terrain, but I will start with the source of what is driving great future-oriented corporate governance in India. And for that, I must credit the Companies Act 2013, and within it, Schedule 4, which talks about the code for independent directors. In fact, it is a code that is likely to serve all directors extremely well, but it's been extremely well crafted in terms of various sections. It talks about 9 guidelines for conduct, which include being ethical, objective, constructive, acting in bona fide for the corporation, spending your time on the affairs of the company, no extraneous constraints, no abuse, remain independent, inform if you become non-independent, serve to make sure that best practices get implemented. It goes on to clear in all our minds our roles and functions, such as being independent, bringing independent judgment to the affairs of the company, making sure that we monitor and report on performance, not only of the board, but of all the key executives, particularly the executive directors of the company. Make sure that the interest of all stakeholders, and particularly the interest of minority shareholders, is given full regard to. Balance the conflicts that arise between shareholders' interest and the interest of management. There are duties which are specified. There are ways in which we need to actually appoint directors. In fact, it goes on to specify even the contents of the appointment letter for an independent director. It talks about how to remove independent directors, under what circumstances. And amazingly, the insight is that one of the chief grounds for removal could be evaluated inadequate performance of the director in performing duties. And of course, it talks about the separate meetings that independent directors should hold. But let us, from that very fertile soil, move to what needs to be done to create future-oriented boards, future-oriented directors, and how do we future-proof the entire process of governance. And there I lean on intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, spiritual quotient, which you've talked about. The good news for corporate India is that because of the extent to which technology has been adapted in performing the compliance functions which are outlined in Schedule 4, a significant amount of the time of the board can now be spent in looking at strategic issues which are of great importance for the future of a company. And now I'm finding that these strategic plans are informed and in fact, absolutely driven, in a sense, by considerations of ESG, environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and governance. And I'm sure Mr. Arnab Goel is going to speak a lot about these issues. But let me just give you a very simple framework which I have begun to see getting implemented. We are beginning to subsume all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which the UN gave us in 2015, into this whole idea of being ESG ready and using moonshots. So it's not enough to be simply remain on purpose. It is important to have a massive transformative purpose of a company, of every company that we are in governance charge of. It's critical to take it to that step. And therefore, I like to select what I like to call moonshots, which will lead companies to absolutely amazing future-oriented performance. Let us take the case of what happened when COVID struck. We focused on 4 aspects. We focused on health, obviously, of the community, of our people, of our suppliers, of people who came to our factories and offices and everywhere to actually perform their duties. We focused on cash, we focused on cost. And because we had that razor focus on these issues, a whole lot of avoidable costs have been eliminated for good. Corporate India has been able to actually get onto a new cost curve. The whole cost curve has shifted in many companies. And it is because of this that we have seen that in Q2 of this year, we had some of the best outcomes ever. In 5 of the 10 companies that I have the privilege of looking at carefully, we had the best quarter ever. In one of them, we also declared the highest dividend ever. It was equal to 5 years dividend in 1 quarter. But the most important thing that we have embraced is collaboration. Atmanirbharta, or self-dependence, has a huge quotient of this ability to be collaborative. To have that confidence, it has to be emerging from an attitude or a mindset. And we can choose out of several mindsets that are prevalent across the length and breadth of our country. We can choose a mindset of abundance, a mindset of exponentiality, mindset of having a innovative way of doing things, a mindset of longevity, a mindset of gratitude. And you can combine and choose 2 or 3 of these different mindsets and deploy your moonshots to achieve your massively transformative purpose. The other thing which I saw because of this new orientation and future-ready boards, that the 7 Ds of disruption or digital world were all deployed almost simultaneously. We decided to disrupt. All old norms, all old assumptions were disrupted. We waited, but not too long. And we, in a manner that was not noticed, suddenly got onto a completely new curve and new framework. The expenditure and the investment in digitization has gone to lengths that I never imagined. For the first time, there is a rush to get onto the cloud. On-prem software and hardware are becoming almost completely obsolete. Companies such as Snowflake, what an amazing cloud-based solution they have put to the world. Because they have been able to practice what I like to call excellent data governance, which includes security and privacy, we've been able to get onto a safe cloud-based performance. Demonetization, reduction of pricing, dematerialization, combining 10 different functionalities of 10 different products into one. Delocalization, physical presence doesn't matter anymore. It has become the least relevant thing. And most importantly, democratization, where we've been able to make things available and affordable. Look at Zoom, for example. 200 of us are on this platform together. It's an unimaginable, brilliant thing that has happened. But what all of this has done is it has focused all our minds on enterprise risk management. And within that, particularly on cybersecurity. What happened in SolarWinds was a huge wake-up call. The whole world began to realize that risk starts traveling from outside in. And you could have a Trojan horse sitting in an innocuous software, which gets remotely activated and can play havoc with government systems and pull in data of the kind that you'd never like to lose. And so all boards have now got a heightened desire to embrace and take charge of cybersecurity. And indeed, the entire ideas of disruption and enterprise risk management, because that's where the big manifestation of protecting the substratum of the business that you are supposed to oversee will get most visibly defined. And finally, I would like to say that there are a few terminologies that I would like to see getting used for future-oriented boards, and I'll just enumerate them. We need to create networks of trust. And these trust networks have to be with auditors, internal auditors, external service providers, outsourced service providers, contractors, almost everybody that we network with. Complete desire to make sure that there is interconnectivity. And this interconnectivity has to be digital. It has to be using data governance mechanisms which are absolutely high quality. ESG, readiness, very critical. Embracing of technology. Very important concept that is emerging is the social license to operate must be earned, deserved, curated, and maintained by the large corporations of this country. In fact, every entity, whether it's a government department or it is a small little MSME, the social license is so critical. We need to be completely in touch with best practices and make sure that those can be replicated. We need to make sure that there is a continuous learning attitude. You cannot afford to stop and think that you have now done it, made it. It is never the case. You will get disrupted in no time. Very important to realize what global competitive forces are now emerging and rising. Critically important to continuously embrace value creation and enhance value creation. Vision, purpose, diversity, equity, inclusiveness, remodeling, redistributing the way that things actually, the fruits of labor are actually distributed. All of this needs to be embraced if you have to be a future-oriented board member and a future-ready board. I like to use two terms, which I will leave you with at the end of my 15 minutes. One is, I like to call it escape velocity. Every organization must discover when it is actually at escape velocity. And I define that as an ability to keep growing at the rate that you choose without drawing in more resources. And that is a very critical point at which people just take off on a hockey stick. And the second thing, which I like to leave behind for all of us to think about, is exponential growth. It is no longer enough to think about a 5%, 10%, 20% growth over previous year's performance. It is important to think of 10x because 10x is possible. And I think it is possible because we now have the leadership, the technology, the frameworks, the mental attitude, and the way to go forward in a way that was not possible ever before. I will stop there and get questions at the end of the two further speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for giving the concept of escape velocity and sky is the limit, and giving the 17 various aspects of good governance. I think your point of view will definitely benefit it all. Now I will request Arnab Goel, sir, who is working on futuristic board and foresightness. And I always admire whenever I'm discussing Arnab, sir, he always gives something different, which is futuristic. And I'll request you, sir, to give your presentation on this relating to futuristic board. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Withdraw the slide. Withdraw the slide. Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Damodaran, Mr. Haribhakti. Friends, and wish you all a very, very happy New Year. It was a real pleasure to hear Mr. Haribhakti, and I always knew that Mr. Damodaran, my friend of 30 years and a charismatic orator, will bring something fabulous here. But frankly, this has been mind-blowing, what I have just heard. And particularly because we seem to share a common passion for the future. And in fact, I thought I was hearing a business counterpart of Peter Diamandis, the co-founder of Singularity University, and the kind of language you use, including abundance. So that was wonderful. So what I will do is to sort of expand some dimensions of the same future-proofing, more from a technology perspective and foresight perspective, and not so much from business perspective, and then bring it together toward the end to corporate governance and boards. So let me, before that, travel a bit into the past. Slide, please. So this is something, next. This is something, a news item from 2002. And this I've taken because this is a Golden Peacock Award for corporate governance. And then what happens, you see the whole thing, all the qualities that you're talking about, except the futuristic one, everything taken care of. And then you say Golden Peacock Award for Satyam Computers. And then next, then suddenly in 2009, you find Ramalingo Raju writing a letter to the board and SEBI and basically talking of a fraud of more than rupees 7,000 crore. And everybody is shocked. Now, next, withdraw. So what happened? I want to share my personal experience. I was Secretary of Corporate Affairs at that time on 7th of January, I remember, at 10:30 in the morning. I received a copy of this letter from Chairman SEBI, Mr. Chandu Bhave. And immediately, the world was shaking all around and media descended. So the whole day went into crisis management. All sorts of things that need to be done, that. But I got time around midnight to think about it. What exactly is it that one needs to do? And I sat in my bed from 12 to 2. This is winters. My wife, of course, objecting, what are you doing? In 2 hours, I thought through what are the implications and what needs to be done. Now, these are issues which have been debated. A lot of issues have been debated about Satyam, but I will share with you what are the issues that I saw at that time, because that was something which is happening. So the first issue I had is, who is the perpetrator? Who is the guilty party? Who are the victims? It's extremely important to know who is the victim and who is actually responsible. What did key people like promoters, auditors, independent directors, what did they do? Did they come into its clean hands? And what should be done in these cases? Now, this is something which I thought of at that night. And after thinking, the decision to go into an inquiry, investigation, SFIU, all that was simple. There's nothing very much about that. But I thought that the company Satyam was the victim. Now, the moment you say the victim, then who suffers? Shareholders, employees, the client, they are the ones who suffer. So if you act against the company per se, there's huge issues there. So I said, no, we must in principle, we must try to save. But how? This had never been done before, and government had no power. So that is when I thought this through, and then I thought of some legal provisions. I spoke to my minister in the morning, and believe you me, by 8:30 on 8th January, I had the Prime Minister's approval to try to save the company. And the Prime Minister later on, he told me personally when I went to brief him, that he was extremely concerned about the impact in those days of India's image. So he was very concerned, and he gave us his full support. Now, that is when we moved quickly. In 8th itself, we prepared all the paperwork. Then we went to company law board. Then we got the order to supersede the board. We set up a new board. And by 11th, we had everybody in place. And then the rest of, is history. And we saved the company and all that. Now, what is the point? The point is that how do you assess this corporate governance? How did you, not do you? Let me go to the past. How did you assess? How do you do it today also? And despite all this talk of corporate governance, ILF has things still happen. So many things are still happening. And there's so many, and you know what happens in a bureaucrat, you find every time there's a failure, there's a whole new set of regulation and rules and regulation guidelines will come. But this doesn't prevent. From Harshad Mehta time to today, nothing seems to have changed in some ways. So these are the key corporate governance issues that we need to look at. That I'm only to say that all is not well with corporate governance. That is all I want to bring from the past. Now I prefer my journey to the future. What will the future be like? You know, these are the questions. What will the future be like? What would it mean for corporate governance? What kind of world will businesses operate in? Because Mr. Haribhakti has mentioned that, and he has mentioned many solutions also. What kind of ethical dilemmas it will create? And they're going to, I'll just come to the kind of ethical dilemmas you will have. How should boards realign themselves in thinking and to meet these future challenges? And what new skills do they require? These are some of the questions I'd like to briefly touch on. So let me begin by a journey to the future. As I say, travel in a time machine. Let us go to Mars and join Anton Musgrave in the year 2029. Video, please.
It's 2029, and all I can say as I look at the Earth from a position of Mars is wow. It's an amazing world, exciting, different, challenging, disruptive, many new opportunities, many industries really struggling. It's interesting to see how incumbents of power way back distantly in 2014 struggled to accept this change, but other new, exciting, innovative players really grabbed the new opportunities of this world. If we think about power in the world and how it shifted from United States, United Kingdom and EU, the so-called West as we used to know it, towards Asia and Africa. 1 billion people in the West, 8.5 billion people in the rest of the planet. Global trade patterns have changed. The oceans of the Indian Ocean are really where international trade now takes place. New ports, new opportunities, new economic growth in these regions, and older regions struggling. This is a world where human beings are ubiquitously, seamlessly, and simply connected to one another, all 9 billion people on the planet, through built-in wearable devices, through portable handheld smart computing devices, or even with implants in their body and perhaps even in all of their organs. This is a world where every one of these connected individuals is also connected to every single object on this entire planet. And all of this real live data information streaming at us is allowing us to create new solutions for humankind.
Next. So where does it come from? You know, exponential technologies, and you can see these, some of them listed here. They're called exponential because this is the way they grow. They grow exponentially. So these are the exponential technologies which are resulting in these kind of things. But what is the impact on next? And what is the impact on business? Let's hear what Peter Diamandis says. Peter Diamandis, if you just see, he says, emerging from these trends of 20 megatrends, likely to revolutionize entire industries, old and new, and redefine tomorrow's generation of business and contemporary challenges, and transform our livelihoods from the bottoms up. So that is the kind of situation that companies face in the coming decade. So I mean, this is one cannot cover it in a few minutes. So let me take a couple of examples. Let me begin with AI next. Now for AI, you can see AI is everywhere. You know that. And this will get even more and more everywhere. There will be no field which will be outside the scope of impact of AI. I mean, people talk about job loss. That is only one of the things. But let me go to two points, which actually are not so much in the spotlight. Withdraw, please. Okay, the first is super intelligence and singularity. You know, the way this whole AI thing is working, soon they'll get to a level of super intelligence. And when singularity comes, technology will be moving so fast and it will be uncontrollable, it will be irreversible. And all these science fiction movies that you see about robots taking over, takeover may not happen, but this is something we need to take into account. The second thing, more insidious, is the way they influence your mind. You see, Google knows you better than your spouse. Amazon knows what you want to buy. Netflix knows what you want to see. And you can use for political propaganda, like the Brexit referendum, like the US 2016 election. So this is the thing which is going to happen. So this is the kind of thing within which our businesses will operate. But let me go to a different level, biotech. We all know what's happening in the medical side and the healthcare side, and 100 will be the new 60. Aging is treated now, aging and death is treated as a disease. So we are finding solutions for those diseases. All that is happening. And this is very good. This has been very useful. Digital health has come to our rescue during the COVID crisis. So that's fine. There are, of course, a lot of privacy issues here that I don't want to even go into that. But there's a second thing which is more worrisome. Or more, not worrisome, I would say more impactful, which is called biohacking, where the machine are used to modify your body. So you have brain chips, where the machine is connected to your brain. You have machines connected to your muscles, and then you start being something more than the just a human being as you are today. Next, so you get into what is called as transhumans. This is going to happen in not too distant a future, definitely not near future, but not too distant a future, in sometime in the 30s. I am just showing it so to give you a perspective of where the Homo sapiens are moving toward, the direction we are moving toward, and the impact will be felt in this decade also, because the enhancement will start now. See, there's an enhancement when you use Google. That itself is an enhancement. But when you get chips, then you're at a different level. So this transhumanism is going to happen, and of course the talk of living in virtual worlds and avoiding aging and death, etc. So I'll leave it there. Withdraw. So it's abundantly clear that future will be very different from the past. Now the question is, how do boards deal with this? The paradox is exponential technologies are creating for them a future with unlimited opportunities, but they're existential threats also. So what kind of governance systems you need to develop? What kind of futuristic corporate strategies you require? That is what you need to look at, and what kind of tools you can have. Mr. Haribhakti has already spoken at length of many of the things, and particularly I liked about the mindset issue. So let me now to give to this mind some tool, and this tool is called Foresight. Next. So this is what is called the future score. What is Foresight? Foresight is a scientific tool which is available for this purpose and helps to develop this kind of situation. You know what is possible future, you know what is plausible future, you know what is probable future, and you decide your preferable future. This is very important to know, that you do a whole analysis. That's a very complex area. But with this analysis, you avoid the projected future. See, the projected future is projecting the past into the future, which is not going to happen. So you choose your preferred future, and then you use backcasting to get to your preferred future. So that is the kind of thing it will give. Now, most companies abroad, the Future 500 companies are using it. I'm personally not very aware of how many companies are actually using Foresight, but I think it's good if they do. Next. So this is what Foresight can do for boards and directors. It can help invent companies' future. And this future, I mean, I like this word invent, which is my tagline for Shaping Tomorrow, my think tank also, to invent the future. So this is, they need to understand the future of the world, the country, the technologies, and their own sector. This is the context in which the companies will operate. And I think this is something Foresight helps in. And then you go to the future of the company. You have the right kind of corporate strategies. You go to future of jobs, because that is changing. And you go to future of compliance. In fact, Pawan Vijay is already working on a startup where trying to have AI-based automatic foolproof compliance systems. If that works, that would be great. So this is the kind of thing Foresight will help with. Next. So this is, if you accept this, then these are the kind of key characteristics successful companies of future will have. And to my mind, a futurist mindset and studies foresight are to one the DNA. For your information, World Economic Forum brought out a paper in August 2020 on the future skills required for success in business post-COVID. Now, they found 4 skills. Of these 4 skills, 3 relate to the future, what they call future literacy, anticipation, and strategic foresight. So, just like Mr. Haribhakti and I'm sure Mr. Damodaran, and I, of course, am totally committed to this thinking about the future. World Economic Forum also says that business has to have a futurist mindset. Then, of course, you need to understand the technologies and what is driving change, what is driving transformation, how do you harness it. Social responsibility, sustainability, ethics, transparency, this all is, and this is something already spoken of. This is important. And of course, you need the right kind of systems. That goes without saying. One thing let me mention, which is about regulation. Personally, I see the future of regulation as something quite different. You know, there's already an excellent communication system, interactive process in place, and regulators are quite proactive. But having said that, and with my own experience of regulation, I find there seems to be some sort of lack of either understanding or interest in the impact of technology on regulation. So I think we need to move towards smart regulation and we need to reimagine regulation. Withdraw. So let me conclude by trying to sum up good governance in 2 words. It cannot be done, I know. Good governance is, and good corporate governance is a big thing. But let me try. And I'll use the words that Shri Kalyan Singh used more than 20 years ago when he was Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh and I was his principal secretary. He said it in the context of good governance by governments. But to my mind, it is equally true for corporates. He used to say, Hamari niti aur niyat dono saaf hain. Personally, I have always believed, while as part of government or in regulation, that in corporate governance also, niti or niyat, these should be our 2 polar star. This is, if you have guided by having the right niti and saaf niyat, I think corporate governance will do what. Next. And this is, let me now just thank you for these corporate professionals for giving this opportunity to listen to some very powerful speakers and to share some thoughts. Let me thank all of you and wish you again a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for giving the foresightness of for board, because whatever we are doing today, we cannot run future. So we have to think futuristic way, and Niti and Niyat word is correctly connected with Satyam Vad Dharmam Chair. So you have to follow this. The same thing, not only think on these lines, but futuristic line also, that is very, very essential. And all boards and all corporates has to think that what is future lies, because the valuation of companies which has no asset is more than the company which has a more assets. So that's why every corporate has to think differently and every board has to think futuristic way. Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable suggestion and insight and foresight for the board. Now I will request Damodaran sir to share his thought on particular concept. Mr. Damodaran, please.
Mr. Pavan Vijay, Mr. Arnab Goel, Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti, and other friends present in this conversation. Let me first of all wish all of you a healthy 2021. I'm deliberately not saying happy, because if you're healthy, you're on the road to happiness. Not like the Americans who believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're endlessly pursuing happiness. They'll never ever get there. But we will get a little happier than we are if we manage our health better. So take care on that front. That's very important. We've just been subject to 2 mind-blowing presentations. It takes normally a little while to recover from that, but I think even as you were providing the bridging comments between Anurag's session and bringing me on, I decided swiftly to come down from Mars to Earth. I thought if we stay in Mars for too long, maybe then there will be other issues. When you come back here, they will ask you for all manner of permits to prove that you really belong. So I decided let's get back to Earth fairly quickly. The second is the future is important. There's no question about it. All of us look forward to a future when things will be better, faster, cleaner, and more participative, when all of us will feel that we are not pawns on the chessboard, but we are actually helping shape our destiny in the manner that we know best and we can contribute best. The future is important. But just to give a sense of balance, let me not discount the present. Where are we now? The question that has been posed to us today is, have we moved from tick box to corporate governance? I think it's an unfair question because ticking the box is compliance. It's not corporate governance. Once we decide that both governance and compliance are different, even they might seem to belong to the same space, but they're completely different. I've never tired of saying that corporate governance is doing the right things at the right time for the right reasons in the right manner. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. Compliance is playing black pieces after the lawmaker or the regulator has played the white pieces. And that's a non-negotiable requirement. If you want to be in the corporate space, you must be compliant. If you're not compliant, you run the risk of, if you're a listed entity, there could be suspension of the trading of your shares. There could be several other penalties that will visit you if you are non-compliant. So I thought that that is something that we should not lose sight of. Now, when you look at the Companies Act, and I know Sailesh Bhai said some very good things about the Companies Act 2013, he and I agree on a large number of things. There are some areas where we don't agree. I think Schedule 4 is not a great work of art. It is an over-elaborate homework exercise by somebody that after Anurag has put Satyam in place, how a company ought to be run in the future, then it was decided that the problem there, the fundamental problem, was that independent directors had gone to sleep in the boardrooms. And therefore, they need to be rudely awakened and kept awake. And the tea and biscuits were not good enough to keep them awake. Therefore, you needed Schedule 4. And Schedule 4 actually, it contains so many things that I remember telling a former minister that if everybody complied with that, we would have an overpopulation of saints in the boardroom. There would not be human beings any longer because it requires you to do a large number of things better, large number of things differently, requires everybody to be angelic in their behavior, and that doesn't happen. If you needed to have that kind of things, you don't need law and regulation. Leave it to people to conduct themselves well, but the world doesn't work that way. I think it's also important to realize that no matter what laws you enact, no matter what regulations you write, these are means to an end. These are not the ends in itself. Okay, you write a great regulation, enact a great law and think, okay, finished, the work is over. No. In our context, both laws and regulation are intended to ensure that business can be conducted in a manner that is relatively smooth, that rewards those that do the right things and punishes those that do the wrong things. Therefore, it's a tool, it's an instrument, it's not the end. So you got to ask yourself this, look at every law and regulation through this lens. Is this helping the ease of doing business? Is it improving the ease of doing business? Doing business rightly, not doing business wrongly. There will always be people who complain that this is excessive, this is unrealistic, you're asking us to do more things than we need to do, it is very prescriptive. You'll often hear people say, we are good guys, we do only the good things, why are you asking us to respect the law. I'll give you just one example. There is a very slim book written many, many years ago called Take on the Street by a former chairman of the SEC in the US, where he says he tried to introduce a new accounting principle and got a lot of pushback. Every time you try to do that, you will get a lot of pushback. One of those letters that he got was a letter which, and I'm trying to paraphrase it, said, we have a great board, we have great advisors, we have a great business plan, we have a great strategy, we have a great code of conduct, we do everything right. Why are you burdening us with one more item? 8 months or so later, that company exploded, and the name of that company was Enron. That letter to the regulator went from Enron saying, why do we need all of this? We have the best advisors, the best practices, the best policies. And Enron also has a 64-page code of conduct, which is worth reading in your spare time, because next to the 10 commandments and its equivalents in the other religious texts, this is the one that gets closest to defining the perfect human being. And this was Enron, and I don't have to tell you what Enron did and the grief that it came to. Therefore, laws and regulations help in a context, but companies need to see value in doing things the right way. At the end of the day, people ask, why do I need to get an independent director on the board? You are telling me what kind of person to get, what skill sets should I look for? None of that is relevant. Get the guy whose heart is in the right place. There was a reference to emotional quotient, and I think that's critical. Directors in the boardroom must have more EQ than IQ. I'm not discounting IQ. And they must have more empathy than sympathy. And we saw a lot of it demonstrated during the COVID times. We wouldn't be sitting here discussing things in a situation where corporates are showing great growth. You have a leading economist writing on the front page of a newspaper saying, sorry, I was wrong. I think the government got it right by not providing more incentives, by not providing more of a stimulus. What they did seemed to be adequate. That kind of an apology doesn't come easy, especially on New Year's Day, on the front pages of a newspaper. So clearly what is happening is that Indian companies are more doing the right thing today than they did yesterday and the day before. Not because the regulator told them, yes, that is very persuasive, you could get punished. Not because the lawmaker told them, but because they have begun to see value in this. They have begun to see difference between investment and expenditure. When you talk in terms of technology, talk in terms of what you need to do to get better and faster systems, that is investment. There was a time when people in companies looked at that as postponable expenditure. Why should I do it now? I'll do it later when the problem kicks in. Those days are gone. I think good companies have realized that you need to move on from there. What we need also to do is to understand that companies must have a purpose. For quite some time, the discussion was on 3 Ps, and I'm not looking at planet for the moment. It was on people, products, and processes. And the argument was that, yes, you can have good products, you can have good processes, others will copy them. You have good people, others cannot copy them. And that seemed to be the end of the world. No. Companies that are winners, companies that are going not to just survive but thrive, are companies that have a purpose that factors in the interests of all stakeholders. And now I think even in the US, the debate has been settled. We are talking in terms of stakeholders, not shareholders. The Milton Friedman School doesn't have too many followers at this point of time, saying provide value to the shareholders. You don't have to think of the rest. That's gone. That is ancient history. Today, I think people have recognized that all stakeholders, and there was mention made of ESG. ESG is responding to the requirements of a large stakeholder, which is society. Society as a stakeholder is being responded to by doing business in a manner that does not deprive tomorrow's generation because we are greedy, we are over-exploitative. We want to do things that don't seem to take into account what the next generation's needs are. An oil company many years ago had an ad, I'm very fond of that. It said, we have not inherited the earth from our parents, we have borrowed it from our children. If the earth that you have borrowed from your children is an earth that you are going to completely deplete of its resources, what is it that you're giving back to the entity that you borrowed them from? Forget that your parents left you with something, you made it worse and then you're handing it over to the next generation. That is a crime against humanity. And that is something that the ESG movement, and I'm happy to see that more and more investors today are saying, okay, your numbers look all right when seen in isolation. There are several other ratios that seem to sort of tick the right boxes. But what is your ESG track record? Don't tell us the English. Don't tell us I intend to do this. Don't write complex sentences that hide your track record in the ESG space. Tell us like it is, and then we will make investments in your company. And I think that is going to be not a distinguishing feature. It's going to be a threshold condition for investment going forward if you want to see good money coming in. I think also what is important is that you need to clear the muck in the regulatory landscape. There are regulations which are long past their sell-by date. They're completely irrelevant. There are laws also, several of them have been junked in the last few years, but there are still several that are available. But you need to have a cleanup exercise to remove the stock element in regulation, the stock of existing regulations that is no longer relevant, no longer productive, no longer enabling. You need to get rid of that. Alongside that, you need a regulatory impact assessment so that you don't take out 2 old regulations and write 4 new ones because you wake up in the morning feeling that you ought to write a regulation. No, you must subject it to, there's a lot of talk about RIA, but I think the action is far behind the thought and we need to get a lot more done there. There is a consultative process clearly that goes into regulations, but behind that process, I do not know how many of the suggestions that are made actually get captured in the regulations when they get written, or is institutional ego standing in the way of constructive suggestions being factored in. That is something that you need to see. I think it's also important to simplify matters. There are only 2 problems in corporate governance. There isn't a third. One is conflict of interest and the other is asymmetry of information. If you can eliminate conflict and reduce asymmetry, I think you have made significant progress. You can't unfortunately eliminate asymmetry, but you can reduce it significantly. But conflict is something that should be plucked from its roots and then buried 10 fathoms deep so that it doesn't surface. It has to be dealt with very, very seriously. One other thought that I wanted to share, there's always this feeling of lack of trust in those that do business. And I think that is hugely counterproductive for a nation and an economy on the move. I believe that the philosophy ought to be the philosophy of the diplomatic services, trust but verify. You can't blindly trust, but you can't have several conditions precedent for trusting. Now, if you look at the RBI consultative paper put out for the banks, which talks in terms of the possible corporate ownership of banks and several other things, there is one provision there which says that before you grant somebody a license, you must get, among other things, clearances from the Enforcement Directorate and the CBI. Are you starting on the assumption that everybody figures on the ED's and CBI's roll call of honor, and you need to see whether he continues to be on the merit list or not on the merit list? For heaven's sake, if there's a problem, go and refer to them. They have a job to do. They will do it for you. But don't go and ask them to write certificates on the prospective behavior of somebody that wants to write a bank. It's eminently unfair to them to get them to write a certificate saying, if you give this guy a bank, he's going to run it properly. So that tomorrow, when you are pulled up, you have a co-accused who gave a certificate saying that this guy is good. No, I don't think that is the way we ought to look at how to do business. there must be much less distrust in the system. Certainly, if you find somebody unworthy of trust, you must go after him. My simple approach to regulation is this: after several years of study of governance and regulations and lawmaking, make it simple. Don't start with distrust, but should you find something wrong, your enforcement should be very, very quick. If you have enforcement action that lasts 20 years, clearly many people look at, even in terms of penalties, there is a discount factor between being punished now and punished 20 years later, and you have a free run for 20 years. That's something that should not be allowed. You must be much faster in your response as far as regulation is concerned. One other thought, and then I will close. I'm acutely conscious of time. And that is, there are questions raised on where is India as compared to Western countries in the area of corporate governance. Instead of giving you a yes or no type of answer, yes, we are there, no, we are not there, let me tell you a conversation that took place in a boardroom where a director of Indian origin, they are the most critical people, Indian origin, but residing for many years abroad, and therefore looking down on India from where he's residing, said in the context of Satyam, and Anurag, it will interest you to know this, said that, no, Indian companies, Satyam is, the kind of representative company, everything can go wrong. In India, there is no governance, etc. So I mentioned to him a few names straight without any consultancy because I didn't expect him to raise this. I mentioned a few names. I said Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, etc. I gave him about 6 names and said these were not Indian companies to the best of my knowledge. So that is, I think, where we stand in regard to, yes, we have our Satyam. You think they don't have skeletons in the cupboard? See the pace at which they came out, tumbling out of the cupboards as soon as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was written. I think we must be positive. We must be hopeful. Whether we look at the future with hope or fear, it's important to look at this present at least with hope. And I want to sign off with one line. A very famous poet once said, if hopes were dupes, fears may be liars. I think, therefore, and as President Kennedy said, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. So if you recognize that that is the only fear you have to grapple with, we seem to be on the right track. To go back to your question, Mr. Pavan Vijay, are we ticking boxes? No, we've moved far beyond that. We are seeing value in corporate governance. Are we nearly there? No, we are not. There's a long way to go. It will always be work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. And I think you have given an agenda for the corporate as well as the regulator. The agenda for corporate is that they should realize that governance is conflict of interest and assimilating of information, which is equal to everybody. And the best part which you have given as an ex-regulator to the regulators, that regulatory impact assessment should take place, because at so many times the corporate world is complaining that too much compliance is there, and that is coming because if 10 compliances are good and 1 is bad, then 1 is overtaking than the other 10 good compliances. So we have to work out. Thank you very much to all 3 speakers who have given a new dimension to the corporate governance. And we have come to the real spirit part, that what is the governance. No doubt we have moved from tick box, but we have to go a long way. That is the right way. And to go a long way, we all has to work out. Now, sir, you all 3 speakers has given their point of view. Now I have some questions before me, which I have received, and some questions I'm receiving here also. So all the questions which are duplicate, I'm reviewing and I'm starting. So what I'll do, I'll take the name and that speaker should give the answer. And if anybody wants to add, then just raise your hand. I will ask that question from him also. So sir, Damodaran sir, I'm starting with you. Can we have a governance from law or something more is required?
Governance is not about law. Governance, as I told you, is about doing the right thing, whether you have laws or don't have laws. Laws and regulations put together a compliance framework. That is the threshold I must cross in order to get into the room called corporate governance.
Okay. Haribakti sir, can you give some, because there is an issue of compliances. So can you give some example of compliances in spirit over compliance in letter? Sir, please unmute yourself.
Compliance in spirit is far superior and must be practiced and can be practiced. I'm very happy to know that you are working on an AI-based solution. There are several such solutions which we have implemented already. And therefore, I'm seeing a whole lot of very, very acute escalations, clear paths to compliance, clear early warning signals being given out to make sure that you don't miss out a date or miss out on something. And that in case you need to be informed compliant, Mr. Damodaran gives a fantastic example of a wrongly structured name board, which I can never forget. And, you know, so all of these things are now pretty much etched into the digital space, and they are there for us to actually adopt. What is important is the tone at the top, to become intolerant. As chairman of the board, or as the managing director, or as the person who sort of has the custodianship of what people will do in your company, you need to make sure that the tone is so clean and clear that no non-compliance will be tolerated. And if that is there, then you don't need to spend more than 5 minutes in a board meeting on compliance matters, because they will be taken care of.
Perfectly right, sir. Anurag sir, is there any relation between corporate governance and corporate failure, sir?
Well, I think the first question is an interesting question, because how do you define corporate failure? Would you say that corporate failure is where a scam happens and something wrong has happened? Is that corporate failure? Or if a company is not doing well, is that also a corporate failure? And then what is corporate governance? You know, personally, I feel that the two are very closely connected. If you have all the dimensions of corporate governance, and I think they have been talked at length, whether it's the compliance aspect, whether it's the leadership aspect, whether the ESG aspect, whether it's the right kind of leadership, right kind of niti, if I may say so, and if you have the right kind of niyan. So if all these and this asymmetry of information and conflict of interest issues are taken care of, so if all the good corporate governance is there, then corporate failure should not take place. Now, the exception could be, some people would say, the exception would be when technology actually leads to a situation where failure takes place. Personally and conceptually, if you have the right kind of leadership, if you have the foresight and farsightedness to see what's happening, if you are able to change yourself, reinvent yourself, and transform yourself, that could happen only rarely. So to answer your short question briefly, I think good corporate governance will lead to very, very far fewer cases of corporate failure, and effective regulation will certainly help. I think I agree with other two speakers on that. You know, all the niyat is fine, but thoda danda bhi zaruri hota hai. The fear factor has to be there, and the confidence, and I'm purposely using the word confidence in the regulator. If you do something wrong, not only you'll be caught, as Mr. Damodaran said, you'll really have a tough time. So I think that's the way I look at the two linkage.
Okay. Damodaran sir, is this current legal framework fair and responsive? What more need to be done, sir?
No, as I said earlier, I am not a great believer in the legal framework delivering governance. To go back to the question that you asked, Mr. Haribakti, about spirit and letter, the compliance is dealing with the letter of the law, governance is dealing with the spirit of the law.
Okay.
That is the basic difference. Should you have more laws, more regulation, more elaboration of existing laws? My favorite response to that is, that the Indian Penal Code is of 1861. It says murder is a crime, culpable homicide is a crime. Several murders have been committed from 1861 till now. And whether we say God forbid or not, some more will continue to be committed going forward. Have we felt it necessary to amend the definition of culpable homicide? No. We are requesting the police, requiring them to go find out who the murderer is and take action against the guy. It's not more laws. Is it inadequacy, adequacy of law? No. With one caveat. If you have laws and regulations and you believe that you've provided for everything and there is, let us say, a regulatory gap, I want to take you back to the late 90s and the plantation companies that came up. RBI said it is not for us to regulate. SEBI said it is not for us to regulate. And therefore, within a period of 2 years, 96 to 98, so many of these came. It was only later that these were called collective investment schemes and SEBI was asked to regulate. But for 2 years, there was a regulatory gap. Now, when you provide, you must ensure there are no gaps. To that extent, you may need some more tinkering with the law, nothing more.
Okay. Shailesh sir, are the Indian corporate governance standard consist with international principles, standards and practices, or you want that we are near to them?
No, I think Mr. Arnab Goel answered it so eloquently, but I will only say this as example. I'm right now going through a 12-session course to be globally certified as an ESG-ready director. And when I see the nature of every one of those sessions, I find that the sum total of those sessions is equivalent to the law, practice, and regulation that we follow, provided we follow it in the spirit, as Mr. Damodaran has been at pains to tell us. And therefore, I would say that we've got the basics right. Now we need to get on to technology. We need to get on to near. Wo shabd mujhe bahut acha laga. And I'm also a fan, as you are, sir, of Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil and Yuval Harari. And so we'll see a huge amount of matching of our thoughts. I've read every word of each one of them. So I think that is where the whole spirit will really start flowing from. And therefore, we are very much there. I don't find at any loss. I chair a few sessions at these. While I'm doing the course, they've asked me to speak on global tax matters. So it's, I think we are there. It's a question of application now.
Nice. Sir, this question is addressed to Damodaran sir and Anurag sir. Sir, you have been the regulator and you have later seen the corporate actual working. Do you see any gaps which need to be filled? Are there some laws or compliance which are unnecessary and do not add to the good governance? Though you have given answer, Damodaran sir, that the regulatory impact assessment should take place. But as a person sitting on the other side of the table, what are the things you are finding, sir?
No, let me say this, that corporates are not faring badly when it comes to, dealing with issues of compliance or, for that matter, even issues of governance. There will be some that are unwilling to do it because they believe in the short term. There will be some that are unable to do it because the regulations also come with a cost. There are cost implications, and therefore they would need to get time to actually create the capacity to put in place certain steps. Now, if you again go back to the RBI paper, not the recent one, but an earlier one, which spoke about all the things that banks should do. There are things that they expect banks to do, which banks simply won't have the money for. I'm talking about the smaller banks. And you have not carved them out separately for those regulations. Sometimes you could have issues of that kind. Are you prescribing things that are impracticable? So a process of consultation, of seeing who can be brought within the fold of which regulation is important. But I think to your question, what is it I'm seeing being a regulator and then coming out into the regulated space? Luckily for me, I have been a regulated entity before becoming a regulator, and then I have come back to being a regulated entity. And I can tell you that I think we blame people that run businesses more than they deserve to be blamed. If something is done right, you and I will not get to hear about it. If something is done wrong, then we'll get to hear. My favorite expression is, dog bites man is not news, man bites dog is news. That is the one that will come in the newspapers. Let us not judge the universe by man bites dog.
Right.
A lot of dog bites man is not news.
Anurag sir, how to judge ethics? Yeah, you want to add
No,
something?
I think you asked this question, wanted me also to say something. So Mr. Damodaran has already spoken very eloquently as usual and covered the whole ground. I just want to add one thing, and it's a repetition part. I don't think we need more laws. And I think this point, I think all three of us, there's in fact, India has too many laws. If I had a very rough and ready rule of thumb, I would say we're better off with half the laws. So at least half can be done away with or reduced in size and all that.
Agree.
But we need two things. We need greater respect for law, and that's a societal issue. Actually, it's not a corporate governance issue. It's a society. We don't have respect for law. I mean, the favorite example given everywhere. You see how you look at traffic lights in London, and you see how you look at them in Delhi. There's no respect for law. So that, from a corporate governance point of view, company's point of view, we've already discussed. So that is important. But since I have been a regulator myself, I do feel that it would help a lot if regulators became much more effective in what they're doing or what they're supposed to do. And let me say, starting from, are they really clear what they are supposed to do and what they have to do? Is there confusion there, or is there clarity? Then do they know how to do it? Do they have the right systems and processes for doing it? Do they have the right expertise, skills, and technology to do it? If you ask me, my own impression, and please, this is not casting any aspersion on anybody, my own impression is there's much more that can be done by regulators. They're doing a good job. But much more can be done if you get into a real mode of, more of an organizational development exercise, more of a clarity about roles, more about how to get it done. So it's more a management role. It's not a legal role. So that is, I think, something which would help. Thank you.
Just to supplement what Anurag said in one sentence, regulatory organizations need to continuously look at capacity enhancement in terms of numbers and skill sets.
And in fact, I would add, personally, I feel they need to constantly reinvent themselves. I mean, when I last year, the year before last, I had gone to Florence for a conference in which I was speaking on, is it time to rethink consumer protection? That was the subject. And then I spoke on smarter regulation to an international audience. And the point was the same. Regulation can be so effective, and it should be lean and mean and very supportive, basically. So I think that is an area, personally, if you ask me, regulatory improvement of organization and regulation, not the law, is where the gap is.
Okay, Anurag sir, continue to this. How to judge ethics?
You know, I remember I had gone to this Kellogg School of Management when I was Secretary Corporate Affairs, and I was setting up my favorite baby, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. That was my baby. My ministry officers didn't believe in it. Mr. Chidambaram didn't agree. Mr. Montek didn't agree. That is the Finance Planning Commission and Finance Ministry didn't agree. And my minister said, go ahead, because he was very supportive. I got it through the cabinet. And in the process, connected with a lot of universities abroad. The point I want to make. So there we're talking, and these people were talking of big courses on ethics and all that. Now, I look at it the Gandhi way. What did Gandhiji say? When you have to take a decision, think of the face of the poorest person. I think if you ask me ethics, I think whose face I should see. Is the shareholders' face? Is it the society?
Minority.
And secondly, do I think of the society? I think these are the issue more of ethics. And ultimately, ethics is something a matter of your own conscience. Ethics is not a matter. And in fact, the more you define it, the worse it would be.
Absolutely right.
So, so the best thing is that you fear yourself. That is the best part. That's the
Self-regulation.
Damodaran sir, you are on the board of some company which are, I think, one of the best professionally managed company, or say real professional company in India. That is called L&T. And you are on the board of some family companies also. What is your experience, sir? Are professional company manage better governance than family-owned business? Because there are so many frauds in both types of companies, and a scandal has taken place in the past.
I think the pattern of ownership is not what determines who is good and who is bad. Secondly, this word professional has different connotations. It is when you say a professional managed company, it need not be a professionally managed company. We've seen examples of that. At the same time, there have been promoters who have delivered great value. You just look at the last 2-3 years, which are the companies that blew up in the face of these are companies allegedly run by professionals. You know, I'll just share a personal anecdote with you. When I was posted as chairman UTI, I was asked by somebody, how come a non-professional has been appointed to lead an organization which is in bad shape? I said, I can answer to the question of being a non-professional. I don't have a problem with that. So long as you don't say unprofessional, I'm okay. I think the real test is who is running the company professionally or unprofessionally. And there is not much to choose between promoter run and non-promoter run. Let me also say this, that if you are looking at where the major mistakes lie, they are run by the entity which till yesterday had the largest number of listed entities. Now I am told Tata Group has overtaken it. I'm referring to the government of India.
Right.
Very, very nicely presented, sir. Haribhakti sir, what are the issues with the auditor? Because you are the chartered accountant and you are the auditor of so many companies and you have seen this. Because professional company secretary and chartered accountant, they are the main pillar of the governance. We can't blame always to the promoter. We are to be blamed and we should be supportive. What is your thinking on this? The issue.
So, fantastic question, and I love to answer it because I've been an auditor all my life. I'm today working on a day when we will not need auditors. And I can see that that day is not too far away. So imagine a world where we have accounting, which is fully blockchained. Why does the whole world have so much faith in the Bitcoin? It's not a fiat currency. It's not issued by any government. It has been issued with certain forced conditions, which make it valuable, which make it trustworthy. No amount of attempts at hacking have been successful in breaking open a Bitcoin. Now just look at what the blockchain does as a technology. If you have records which become immutable and you do not need to make data entry, the biggest reason why we have accounting fraud and manipulation is that you can go over a thing and correct it by entering data. Today, technology exists. पूरी जो हमारी इंद्रियां हैं वो हम यूज करेंगे तो किसी को डेटा एंट्री करने की जरूरत नहीं है. It will be data sets which will be captured at source and entered into a blockchain system of accounting. The world will not need accountants. The world will need somebody to make sure that this thing happens with proper data governance, proper security, and proper privacy. If that is assured, then you'll have a reliable, trustworthy, immutable accounting, and therefore a reliable set of decisions which are data-led. And I loved the discussion today because so much emphasis on data-led regulation, reevaluate regulation. I would say, why should regulation and law not be subject to machine learning and artificial intelligence? So that laws which needs to be changed or dropped or whatever, you don't need to make committees sit for years and years to do this. It's irrelevant now. All that intelligence can be captured. I can tell you that in one company we have mapped, Anurag sir, you will be very happy to know, the entire 18 lakh population of companies in India. We have mapped them on 53 criteria based on public information. Thanks to the excellent data that we now have access to, and we've used machine learning and artificial intelligence to clean it so that now we can create scores. Now, when you have this capability, because, and let me credit our legal system, everywhere in this country, wherever a case is going on, today it is on a database and you can access it. We don't use it. The problem is that we don't bend backwards to use data. If we use it and we blockchain it, and I've written about it, it's now publicly out in ET and various other places, that this is the way to go for India. We can have a new India only with blockchain, trustworthy accounting, and therefore no need for auditing. So what will auditors do? Auditors will then keep doing the value addition part, the interface, the interconnectivity, the trust building, the thinking about the future, the disruption, the technology, the convergence. That's what will be done by what you will then call auditors, new auditors. That's my vision.
Sir, though we have completed our time, but all participants are intact, those who have joined in the beginning, sir. So I'm just extending for 10-15 minutes for your permission, because some few questions are very important.
I have to run, Pawan. I'm really sorry, but there are a few people waiting for me. Goel Saab, what a delight to meet you, and Damodaran Saab, absolutely
My
delightful.
pleasure.
I would like to one day be part of your think tank, sir, whenever you have the grace.
It will be a pleasure to have you leading some of the things.
Damodaran sir and Raj sir, can we just extend for a few questions?
Okay. I am okay.
Okay. Sir, Damodaran sir, this question is, which factors should a person consider before accepting independent directorship of the company? There have been cases where certain unscrupulous promoter inducting big names as independent director to showcase good governance and showing their picture better. So this message is to all the independent director who wants to join any board of the company.
Oh, this is an interesting question, one that I grapple with every day, because people sometimes ask me, I've been invited to join such and such company, should I join? At the end of the day, I say it is your decision. Let me but fill you in on a few facts that you need to address. But if you look at the history of independent directors or non-executive directors, in England, they were called flower vase directors. So you brought the flower vases into the boardroom and they lent color. It became a colorful board, not that they added value to the discussions, right? So you got people who were very good in their past professions, whatever they were, whether they were good film directors, good generals in the army, and then you brought them into the boardroom. There is a warning in the mutual fund industry, which I'm very fond of. Past performance is no guarantee of future returns.
Okay.
So if you look at somebody's past performance and bring him into the boardroom, it's a completely new world altogether. So what should you look at when you want to join a board? First, you must ask them why you're being invited. Whoever extends you that invitation, you must ask him or her, why am I being invited? What do you want me to bring to the board? If the answer to that question is a satisfactory answer, look at a few of the following. This is a long laundry list. I won't trouble you with that. Look at who else is on the board. Look at what the regulatory track record is of the board. Certainly look at the financials. Certainly look at the annual report to see whether there are any leads there which will make you uncomfortable. General reputation, you get to hear in the marketplace, you get to hear from your friends. For example, if somebody said, I'm going to join such and such company, and the previous week there was something hugely negative about that, your friends will then tell you, if you tell them, I'm going to join that company, say, why do you want to commit suicide? You have several productive years of your life, why are you going and joining? So I think the existing directors, the reason why you're being invited, in fact, when the woman independent director became a necessity, I know about 10 or 15 women who got requests from several companies to join the boards. A few of them I happen to know well. I sit on boards with them, and they said, why do you think he reached out to me? And my suggestion was this: ask that person whether you are now being invited because the board requires to have a woman, or because he thinks you'll add value to the board. If the answer is that, he needs a woman director, tell him to go and find somewhere else and not to ask you, because you've distinguished yourself. You don't need to go there to help him tick a box. But I think it's important to look at the regulatory track record. All of this is in public domain now. You can easily figure out, but don't jump in and accept something. The other thing I will say, but many people don't agree, is look at how you are going to be compensated. I think you owe it to yourself, if you're going to, contribute valuable time to the board and the committees, that you're compensated properly. If you go there to do social service, sooner rather than later, you'll tell yourself, I have better things to do. I may as well go and work with an NGO. Why am I sitting on a corporate board if I want to actually see the fruits of my labor? So I think it's important to see how companies compensate the directors. And most important, is there a robust process of board evaluation, so that you know that if you've done your job well, that will show up in the evaluation process. Unfortunately, in India, most companies have a sham exercise of evaluation, because Schedule 4 prescribes exercise, and everybody gets 6 out of 5 or 11 out of 10. The best collection of people you can have in the whole universe, you will find in that boardroom if you look at those numbers. And yet you will find it's a board that adds no value at all. So I think, in the interest of both contribution as well as self-preservation, don't rush in as soon as you get your first invitation. Ask a few questions.
Okay. Anurag sir, how to define independence? I think, sir, I will ask you also. So both, Anurag sir, how to define independence?
I think that has been discussed at length about this question of independent director. Personally, I had a view as Secretary Corporate Affairs, and I still have not given it up, though there are a lot of things to be said for independent director. I mean, I think I've always felt there's a sort of contradiction, the way it's contradiction in terms the way it's happening. The promoter essentially is selecting the independent director, and then and is also giving handsome compensation. And Mr. Damodaran also said that that's where you should go. And after that, you say that you catch if he's doing something wrong, or you be a value director. So I'm not against it, and some independent directors are doing a great job. So that is one. So to answer your question, I think independent director should be one who is so placed as to be able to take decisions without any external pressure or any extraneous consideration. So if that is so, then it's fine. If the promoter gets him, that's fine. It's also to remember that he's not an inspector. So it's a tightrope walk. He's not an inspector. You can't say he is fighting the battle for minority shareholders. No, he has to add value also. So independence, to my mind, and I'm sure Mr. Damodaran will give a better phrase, that if he can be free of external influences and extraneous consideration, and has the ability to take independent judgment, then that is what independence is.
Sir, your view on independence, sir.
Independence is a state of mind. You cannot define it. You should not attempt to define it or explain it. It's a state of mind. Now, the reason that you have independent directors flows from the distrust that you have of the promoter and the businessman. that you believe that once the company is listed, you need to have a bunch of people there who will ensure that they don't run away with whatever they can. And that is the context in which you are brought, and that's wholly wrong. Actually, the Companies Act provides that this is a responsibility of every director to look after the company, interests of the company as a whole, and thereafter its stakeholders, including employees, including other categories, and including society. It's specifically mentioned in the Act. So you are going there to add value to the company. You must act independently. You can't, as Anurag said rightly, be subject to extraneous pressures, influences. Then you cease to be independent. There's no question about it. The good news is, if you ask me, I have been now a board director for several years. If you ask me whether tough questions are being raised in the boardroom today as compared to 10 years ago, the answer is an unequivocal yes. Today, more questions are being asked, tougher questions are being asked, follow-on questions are being asked. You cannot fob off a director easily if he or she actually digs in and wants information. At the same time, you shouldn't see yourself as the opposition party in the boardroom. 4 independent directors are there. They sit together and oppose every decision, saying we are independent, so we will oppose every decision that the management brings. Then you don't have to go and sit in the boardroom and waste your time, because that company will never take off. There will be no decisions, no business, and no need for a board and a director in due course, right? So I think the good news is that today boards are more active. Maybe it is because the expectations are higher, the penalties, they're more focused on the penalties now, and therefore people are doing better than they were doing in the past. But the fact is that this is an institution which must be encouraged, which must be strengthened, which must be reinforced. If a few people do something wrong, or they sleep, or maybe with open eyes allow things to pass without asking questions, we should not generalize from that and then throw out the baby with the bathwater. Certainly give the baby a bath, but now if you want to throw out the baby, the bathwater, and the bathroom also, then you will have a problem. So the institution must be strengthened.
Sir, as an investor,
Anurag wanted to say something.
Pawan, there is a question which I saw in the current question, which from somebody from MSME. But I would like to answer that question.
Please, sir, please.
Yes, this is somebody from MSME, and after hearing me, thought it's going to be a very expensive and difficult exercise of using Foresight. So he said that he or she says, how do you use Foresight in an MSME? I like the question because it is a very fundamental issue. It will help you to clarify. See, there are 2 mindset issues in the question. One issue saying, I am MSME. Now, the whole premise of Foresight is that that may be so today, but even from a small company to a huge company may take only 2-3 years. So you need to get out of the MSME mindset as it is. The second mindset is that you don't need to be an expert in Foresight. You need to have a futurist mindset. Now, whatever I know in this area, I have learned all of it entirely on my own. And what I know now is when I advise a company, I know exactly what expertise you need. And that is not very expensive to get. So I think anybody who's interested should first make himself or herself very aware and sensitive. So you have a future mindset. Once you have a future mindset, then it's not very difficult to find the right people, not at very great cost, to help you with Foresight. So this is a general thing for everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, there is one question as somebody is asking, that good governance for the government officers and ministers and political parties. Good governance in the corporate world will follow from good governance in the government.
Is that for me or Anurag?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I will give a sideways reply. I will recommend a book written by a colleague, Anil Swarup, who is a former court secretary and education secretary, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. I think that would make good reading. Now, Mr. Damodaran will answer the question more fully.
No, I think that's a good book. In fact, Swarup has written a very good book based on his experiences. But, if you look at governance outside of the corporate entity, let us look at what government as majority shareholder does in the corporate space. Most of the PSUs don't have the complement of independent directors as we speak now, right? And the classic case is Coal India, where initially the independent directors acted as government would have wanted them to act. Then when they were threatened with litigation by one of the overseas investors, by the Children's Fund, they promptly went to the other side and opposed the management proposal. And then what happened? The government threw out all of them. For good measure, the independent directors in several other PSUs were also removed at the same time before they could do anything similar. I remember a conversation with somebody in the government at that time. I said, what crime did these guys commit that you threw them out? He says, you know, they are acting independent of government. How can they do that? So that is as far as government as a majority shareholder is concerned. As far as providing for good governance, I was reminded of this. I was at the ISB in a seminar maybe about 12, 13 years ago, and somebody was speaking about, not me, I was in the audience, my session hadn't come. Somebody was speaking about the need for good corporate governance. And someone from the audience, some very distinguished man said, when you don't have good governance, why should the corporates? Exactly the question that's been asked now. Why should the corporates behave well if everybody else is not behaving well? And the gentleman who was speaking about it was on stage, was completely lost. I ventured an answer. I was sitting in the audience, but I wanted to help him out. So I said, maybe corporates can set an example that government can follow. You normally expect government to set the example. Since that's not happening, maybe corporates can set the example. And I think that is what we need to do. As far as government and governance are concerned, these are not synonyms. Government is something else, governance is something else. If we think that because there is a government, there will be a governance, no, we are barking up the wrong tree. That's not to say everything that's in government is going wrong. I think there are significant changes and improvements, and we must be optimistic. Some things have gone wrong, will go wrong, because some processes that we thought had stood the test of time have been sacrificed in some places. I think everyone in the system has his or her share of blame. To point the finger at the political executive is incorrect. The bureaucracy, of which I was a very proud member for many years, has its own share of blame. It has always had, as has the political executive. As also the people of India, maybe we didn't demand enough at the right time, and therefore now we are finding that we need to ask and we are demanding. At some time, we took whatever was done there as the right thing to be done, because we thought ex officio everything happened right. It doesn't happen ex officio.
Okay, last two questions, sir, which then I will close, sir. As an investor, should higher P be considered as indication of good governance? And if it is this, then why the PE of PSU is less, which are identified as a good governed company, because there is no conflict of interest per se? Damodaran, sir.
No, who says there is no conflict of interest? I think that is the wrong starting point. There is a shareholder who has more than 50%, and then there are other shareholders. And if we think there is no conflict of interest, take the oil marketing companies, for example. The government, as a policy measure, would like some kind of control on the prices. It is always like, because there is a larger public purpose that you can't allow the prices to get to run away. But that directly impacts on the minority shareholders' interests, because if the prices went up and the company did better, they would get better returns. So there is an inherent conflict sitting there. To think there is no conflict is not right. But whether the PE ratio is the ratio that you will look at, I would say you must look at not just 1 year, 1 quarter. I think this quarter tak business has to go. We need to, I am a firm believer, I know it seems very, very retrograde, but I'm a firm believer that we should have the courage at some stage to roll back to half-yearly thing, as Britain does, because then there's less pressure on the board and the management to manufacture numbers. And, it is even better for the health of the chief executives that every quarter they don't have to deliver numbers. So I think we should do some of those things. The real important thing is, don't look at a single ratio. Is there a business plan? And going forward, I think ESG is critical. Anurag spoke about it. Sailesh spoke about it. The investors hereafter will write out the checks only if they see an ESG track record. Today, they are also getting their things in place. There are dedicated ESG funds, but even the general funds are looking at ESG as a very major thing. SEBI is attempting to redraft the business responsibility report now, but even that doesn't travel far enough. We need to show much more in that direction. And I have one suggestion for all of you, which is you must create a movement that the ESG report must be written in simple sentences. Otherwise, what happens in all these reports, complex sentences are used to hide the truth. So you should insist that it should be written in simple sentences so that nobody's taken for a ride.
Okay. So last question for both of you. Now, after discussing with everybody, and you have, no doubt you have given your thought, but last sentence, you just explain the good governance on overall view, which can be your crux of the governance, sir. Both of you, sir.
Anurag, want to go first?
Sir, please unmute yourself.
I'm personally a great believer. It's all about, in fact, it is all about niyat. I mean, whether you call it the right intent, the right motivation, that is what at the heart of all this ethics and all this corporate governance is niyat. If your niyat is clear, I think everything else can be taken care of. So, I mean, to me, the single word is enough.
Okay. Sir.
Let me attempt a slightly, not a different answer, but let me put it a little differently. What are the two tests of whether you are acting right or acting wrong in terms of the value system? Your decision may go wrong. That's a different matter. We are all not God. We can't get all decisions right. Some will go wrong. But the intent ought to be right, as Anurag said. The two tests, according to me, one is this something you can go and explain to your mother? Will you have the confidence to look your mother in the eye and explain it to her? This is what I did. And this is how I think is going to benefit. The more difficult test, can you look into a mirror and tell the guy who stares at you from the other side that you have acted correctly? Do you have the confidence to look that guy in the eye, the guy you see in the mirror? Of course, there is an easier way. What many people do when they have problems is they clean the mirror. Cleaning the mirror is not the answer. You got to clean the object so that the image is right.
Absolutely right, sir. You have given very simple answer of entire thing. Anurag sir has given the word niyat, that is intent, and you have given what you can explain to your mother, that is the best part, and what you can talk before the mirror, that is another thing. I think this is the two very simple crux in place of going to various words. I think these are the things which will go a long way. I think we have organized various programs, but this was one of the best program where the highest standard of discussion has taken place. And I thank all three speakers, Damodaran sir, Anurag sir, and Haribhakti sir. They have explained very nicely and very eloquently all these points. I'm grateful to all of you, sir, for participating in our program. And the ESG is the next buzzing word which can take care of all these issues. And with some data, some analysis, I will request all three, I think the person who is raising the flag of Indian corporate governance system, I'll request all of you to invite again our ESG program where we can discuss the governance of second level and where we can go. So thank you very much. On behalf of all participants, I thank Damodaran sir, Anurag sir, and Haribhakti sir for participating. And thank you very much, sir. Thanks all participants who are there, who have participated today's program. And I will just inform the next Friday on 8th, we are organizing our program, 37th program on this second Q&A on interpretation and implementation of PIT. That is the point which Damodaran sir has mentioned, that all person should have same information. PIT is nothing, but there's a one word which he has mentioned, that everybody should have information equally at the particular time. Mr. Sundaresan, Chief Executive Officer of SEBI, Savitri Parekh, Narayanan, and Mohini will speak. Last time we organized program, we were able to give answer of 80 questions. Now we got 60 more questions. We will give all answer on that particular day. So this is the program which we are organizing on Friday, 8th January 2021. With this, I thank all the panelists and I respect their views, and I think they have given a new dimension of governance in a very simplified manner, in place of giving so many complicated words they have given. Thank you, Damodaran sir. Thank you, Anurag sir, for participating. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. And thanks for giving the opportunity to meet Mr. Damodaran and Mr. Haribhakti and all the panelists.
He's brought both of us together after ages.
Yes, yes. I'll get in touch with you.
Yeah,
We must
great.
renew our friendship.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.